It began with a breach of protocol and ended with a dramatic airborne interception. A commercial pilot, Captain Reed Hawthorne, had bent the rules to help a pregnant woman who'd missed her flight. Little did he know his compassionate decision would lead to an emergency delivery at 30,000 feet, saving 2 lives. The very next day, his aircraft found itself in the startling crosshairs of F-16 fighter jets, mid-flight. As Captain Reed Hawthorne settled into his regular morning flight, the calm hum of the engines was shattered by a sharp crackle on his radio. A voice, laced with military precision, cut through the air. "Commercial flight on heading 020. Identify yourself immediately." Reed's eyes instinctively darted to his left window, and what he saw nearly made him lose his composure. An F-16 fighter jet was flying in tight formation with his Boeing 737, so close he could clearly make out the pilot's helmet. Moments later, a second F-16 materialized on his right wing, mirroring the first. Just 24 hours prior, Reed had been confronting an entirely different kind of crisis, one that would set the extraordinary events of today into motion. The previous day, a harried gate agent had approached him with an urgent problem. "Captain," she began, "we have a passenger situation. A woman missed her connection and desperately needs to get to Phoenix. She's pregnant. Her husband's military, and unfortunately, all flights are canceled for the next 2 days." Through the cockpit window, Reed observed a young woman at the gate, visibly distressed, heavily pregnant, and clutching a handful of papers. Her desperation was palpable. "How pregnant?" Reed inquired. "Very," the agent confirmed. "She's worried about flying this late in her pregnancy, but she absolutely has to get home." Reed's first officer, Tom, glanced up from his checklist, stating the obvious. "We're at capacity, Captain. Not a single empty seat." But Reed's mind was already racing, considering the observer seat. It was technically reserved for airline inspectors and federal marshals. Certainly not passengers. And unequivocally against company policy. Yet his thoughts drifted to his own wife, to the sheer panic he'd felt years ago when she'd gone into early labor while he was away, flying cargo routes through a storm. Some rules, he mused, were meant to be bent, even broken, at the right moment. "Bring her up," Reed announced, his decision firm. And just like that, the first rule was broken. The woman who soon entered his cockpit was Elena Vasquez. She looked utterly exhausted, yet her eyes shone with profound gratitude as she held out a doctor's note, clearing her for travel. "Captain, I can't thank you enough," she began, her voice cracking slightly. "My husband is on emergency leave from Luke Air Force Base, and if I don't get home tonight—" Reed gently interrupted, helping her settle into the jump seat. "Don't worry about it, Elena. Sometimes regulations need to take a back seat to doing what's right." A fragile smile touched Elena's lips through her worry. "My husband says that too. He's in aircraft maintenance on F-16s. He always talks about pilots who know when to follow the rules and when to follow their instincts." Reed nodded, feeling the familiar pull he always experienced around military aviation. He'd grown up dreaming of flying fighter jets himself, but the weight of college loans and family responsibilities had ultimately steered him toward commercial aviation. He'd never regretted his path, yet he harbored immense respect for those who served. Little did Reed know that within 24 short hours, that very respect would be repaid in a manner he could never have possibly imagined. The takeoff was remarkably smooth, and Elena appeared to be settling in, occasionally asking questions about the cockpit instruments or remarking on the twinkling lights spread out below. She even began to mention how her husband had even taught her about aviation, how he maintained the powerful engines that propelled some of the Air Force's most advanced aircraft. They were a mere 40 minutes into the 2-hour journey when the world inside the cockpit abruptly shifted. Elena's voice, tight with sudden, unmistakable pain, cut through the calm. "Something's wrong." Reed spun around to face her, his eyes immediately catching her strained, pale face. She was gripping the armrests, her breathing rapidly shallowing. This was clearly more than just ordinary pregnancy discomfort. "Tom," Reed commanded, his voice sharp with urgency. "Get the flight attendants up here. Medical emergency." Elena doubled over, a gasp escaping her lips as another contraction seized her. "They just started," she managed to say, her words punctuated by sharp breaths. "But they're strong. Really strong." She looked up at Reed, her eyes wide with fear. The baby wasn't due for another 3 weeks. Reed's extensive training immediately kicked in. He'd handled medical emergencies before, but never in his 18 years of flying, a childbirth at 35,000 feet. While his hands swiftly worked the radio, his mind raced through every conceivable option. "Phoenix approach Flight 447 declaring medical emergency, requesting immediate diversion to nearest suitable airport." The response from air traffic control was swift. "Flight 447, nearest airport is Flagstaff. Runway 21, winds light and variable. Medical personnel standing by." The flight attendants arrived moments later carrying the medical kit, accompanied by a passenger who identified herself as a registered nurse. Reed focused intensely on maintaining a stable flight, while the impromptu medical team assessed Elena. Suddenly, a jolt of turbulence shook the plane. Elena cried out, a sharp, involuntary sound of agony. "Captain!" the nurse called, her voice urgent and cutting through the cockpit's controlled chaos. "This baby is coming now. We're not going to make it to any airport." Reed felt his heart rate surge, but his voice remained remarkably steady as he relayed the critical update to air traffic control. "Phoenix approach, be advised, we have imminent childbirth on board. Requesting priority handling and ambulance on standby." The reply came back instantly. "Copy that, Flight 447. You're cleared direct Phoenix. Descend and maintain flight level 280. Emergency services will be standing by." Reed's hands moved across the controls with practiced precision, but his mind was a whirlwind. One life had now become 2. And both were entirely dependent on his ability to manage this escalating crisis. "Hold her steady, Tom," he murmured, his hands slick with sweat. "We're delivering a baby at 35,000 feet. The next 20 minutes pushed every skill Reed had honed over his years of flying to their absolute limit. He had to maintain the smoothest possible flight path, coordinate continuously with air traffic control, manage vital radio communications with ground medical personnel, and simultaneously keep a cabin full of increasingly nervous passengers calm. All of this while a woman gave birth right there, in his cockpit. "One more push, honey," the nurse encouraged Elena, her voice firm yet gentle. "I can see the head." Reed made minute, almost imperceptible adjustments to the autopilot, ensuring the ride remained as gentle as possible. Every tiny tremor of turbulence, every subtle course correction, every radio call, everything had to be perfect. Elena, and now her unborn child, were counting on him. Then, a moment that transcended the technical demands of flight. "He's here!" the nurse announced, her voice filled with relief. A soft, tiny cry broke through the crackle of the radio, a sound of new life filling the confined space. The baby was here. Reed felt an unexpected welling of tears in his eyes as the sound of that fragile, beautiful cry resonated through his cockpit. "Flight 447, how are we doing up there? Phoenix approach." Reed's voice, thick with emotion, responded. "Baby delivered. We have a healthy soul." Successfully. Mother and child appear stable, requesting immediate landing clearance. "Flight 447, cleared for approach runway 8 right. Fire and rescue standing by. And Captain, nice work up there." The landing at Phoenix Sky Harbor was one of the smoothest of Reed's career. As they taxied to the gate, paramedics quickly boarded the aircraft. Elena was alert, cradling her newborn baby, looking utterly exhausted but radiant. "Captain," she said, her voice soft with emotion, as the medical team prepared to take her to the hospital. "I don't know how to thank you. You saved both our lives today." "You did the hard work," Reed replied, offering a reassuring smile. "I just flew the plane." As Elena was carefully wheeled off the aircraft, she called back, "My husband is going to want to meet you, James Mitchell, aircraft maintenance. He's going to be so grateful for what you did." Reed waved goodbye, thinking that was probably the last he'd hear about the whole incident. There would be paperwork, certainly, and perhaps some recognition from the airline, but these kinds of emergency situations usually faded into just another story pilots told over coffee. He had no idea that Technical Sergeant James Mitchell was already making phone calls that would change everything. The very next morning, Reed was flying his regular route from Phoenix back to Denver. Flight 226, a routine morning departure mostly filled with business travelers heading to early meetings. Reed was just settling into cruise altitude when his radio crackled, an unfamiliar voice cutting through the air. "Commercial flight on heading 020. Identify yourself immediately." That wasn't air traffic control. The voice carried a military precision that instantly made Reed sit straighter in his seat. "This is American 226 en route Denver. Flight level 350. American 226, you are ordered to maintain present heading and altitude. Do not deviate from course." Reed looked out his left window and nearly lost his composure. An F-16 fighter jet was flying in tight formation with his Boeing 737, so close that he could clearly see the pilot's helmet. The sleek gray aircraft moved with predatory grace, its presence both beautiful and intimidating. Moments later, a second F-16 appeared on his right wing, mirroring the first. Tom, Reed's first officer, was staring out the window in absolute amazement. "What the hell is going on?" he breathed. Before Reed could even begin to answer, the radio crackled again, but this time with a different voice, warmer, yet still carrying an unmistakable authority. "American 226, this is Luke Air Force Base. We have something important to tell you." Reed's throat went dry. Luke Air Force Base. That was where Elena's husband was stationed. "Captain Hawthorne," came a new voice, filled with raw emotion. "This is Technical Sergeant James Mitchell. Yesterday, you delivered my son at 35,000 feet. I wanted to thank you personally." The pieces instantly clicked together in Reed's mind. Elena's husband. He had arranged this. The United States Air Force was escorting his commercial flight as an unprecedented, awe-inspiring gesture of gratitude. "Sergeant Mitchell," Reed stammered, overwhelmed. This is incredible." but you didn't need to. Captain, what you did yesterday went beyond duty. Mitchell's voice resonated with sincerity. You saved my wife and my boy when they needed help most. The Air Force, we take care of our own, and after yesterday, you're one of ours. Suddenly, the F-16 pilot on Reed's left wing chimed in on the radio. Captain Hawthorne, this is Major Rodriguez. Sergeant Mitchell told us about your flying yesterday, managing an emergency berth while maintaining safe flight operations under pressure. That's some impressive piloting, sir. Reed gazed out at the sleek fighter jets flanking his airliner, feeling a profound sense of humility. These pilots flew some of the most advanced aircraft in the world, and he felt dwarfed by the magnificent gesture they were making. Thank you, Major, Reed managed to respond. It was my crew and the passengers who made it work. Negative, Captain. Leadership starts at the top, Major Rodriguez countered. You kept everyone calm and got that plane down safe while delivering. A baby. That's exceptional flying in anyone's book. The escort continued for another 10 minutes, the F-16s maintaining perfect, unwavering formation with Reed's much slower airliner. In the cabin behind him, passengers were pressed against the windows, eagerly taking photos and videos that would be shared thousands of times within hours. Reed had never felt anything like this in his 18 years of commercial flying. The sheer respect of military aviators choosing to honor a civilian pilot's emergency response. American 226 will be leaving you here, Sergeant Mitchell's voice came through again. But Captain, if you're ever near Luke Air Force Base, you've got an open invitation. Elena and the baby want to meet the pilot who brought them safely home. Reed's throat tightened with emotion. How are they doing, Sergeant? He managed to ask. Perfect healthy baby boy, Captain. And Elena insisted on the name. We're calling him Reed James Mitchell. The boy needs to be named after the man who delivered him safely into this world. Reed turned away slightly, blinking hard, fighting back tears. 18 years of flying and no passenger manifest had ever meant this much. As the F-16s peeled away in a graceful sweeping climb, vanishing into the vast blue, Reed sat in stunned silence. They'd named the baby after him. A child born in his cockpit would carry his name through life. His radio crackled one final time. Captain Hawthorne, this is Colonel James Crawford, Luke Air Force Base Commander. What you did yesterday represents the finest traditions of aviation. When you have time, we'd like to invite you to visit the base. The entire squadron wants to meet the pilot who delivered one of our own. 2 weeks later, Reed found himself walking through the main gate at Luke Air Force Base, a bouquet of flowers for Elena in one hand and a small teddy bear for baby Reed in the other. The base commander had personally invited him for a special ceremony honoring civilian aviation heroism. The ceremony was held in a massive hangar filled with the imposing presence of F-16s, the very same type of aircraft that had escorted Reed's flight. Elena was there with baby Reed, looking healthy and absolutely radiant. Sergeant Mitchell stood proudly beside them, impeccable in his dress uniform, a beaming smile on his face. Ladies and gentlemen, Colonel Crawford addressed the gathered crowd of airmen and their families, his voice resonating through the hangar. Yesterday, we honored military aviators who risked their lives in service to our country. Today, we honor a civilian pilot who risked his career to save 2 lives. Reed was then presented with a plaque recognizing his exceptional airmanship and humanitarian service. But the moment that truly mattered came when Elena, her eyes brimming with love, gently placed baby Reed into his arms. "Captain," she said softly, her voice thick with gratitude, "meet Reed James Mitchell. He's got your calm under pressure and his daddy's love of aviation." Reed looked down at the tiny baby who had been born in his cockpit, his mind tracing the extraordinary chain of events that had begun with a simple decision to break airline policy. One broken rule had led to saving 2 lives, which in turn had led to the most meaningful recognition of his entire career. Sergeant Mitchell approached, extending his hand, a look of profound respect in his eyes. "Captain, I maintain the engines on those F-16s that escorted you every day. I make sure military pilots can fly safely. Yesterday, you made sure my family stayed safe. That means everything to me." Reed firmly shook his hand, understanding that he had been accepted into a brotherhood that transcended the differences between military and civilian aviation. "Sergeant," Reed replied, his voice sincere. "It was an honor to help." As Reed toured the maintenance hangar where Sergeant Mitchell worked, he was struck by the precision and unwavering dedication of the Air Force personnel. These were people who understood that attention to detail could mean the difference between life and death, whether you were flying a fighter jet or delivering a baby. "You know, Captain," Sergeant Mitchell said as they watched mechanics meticulously servicing an F-16, "what you did yesterday showed us something important. Good flying is good flying, whether you're wearing a uniform or not." Reed observed the methodical work of the maintenance crew, thinking about the profound parallels between their dedication and his own steadfast commitment to safe flight operations. Colonel Crawford joined them, carrying a small, dark presentation box. "Captain Hawthorne, we don't recruit commercial pilots, but we remember the ones who show what service really looks like." He handed Reed a carefully folded American flag and a beautifully framed certificate. "To Captain Reed Hawthorne," the certificate read, "for delivering more than passengers. You delivered hope, life, and a powerful reminder that aviation is fundamentally about serving others." Reed accepted the flag, his hands not quite steady with emotion. "Colonel, this means more than you know." "Captain, you earned it," the colonel responded, a genuine smile on his face. "What you did up there, that's what we call flying with honor." 6 months later, Reed was still flying commercial routes, but something fundamental had changed. The airline had not only declined to discipline him for breaking policy, they had featured his story in their safety training program as a shining example of crew resource management under extreme pressure. But the real, profound change was in how Reed approached his job. Every pre-flight check, every passenger interaction, every routine flight now carried the significant weight of knowing that aviation was about more than just transportation. It was about being ready, truly ready, when people needed you most. The photos Elena sent every month showed little Reed growing into a happy, healthy baby. Each picture included a note, each one thanking Captain Reed for the safe delivery that had so beautifully brought their family together. On quiet mornings, when Reed was cruising at altitude, he would sometimes spot military aircraft in the distant sky and be transported back to that unforgettable day F-16s had escorted his airliner. He had learned a profound truth. The most important moments in aviation weren't about the sophistication of your aircraft or the complexity of your route. They were about the pivotal moment when regulations stepped aside for the sake of humanity, when you made the courageous choice to help someone who desperately needed it, and when doing the right thing led to something truly extraordinary. Reed's logbook now included a unique entry, one that would forever stand out among thousands of routine flights. Emergency delivery, mother and child safe, one pilot honored by the United States Air Force. Because that's precisely what Reed had learned from his unexpected encounter with the military. Service, he realized, wasn't about the uniform you wore or the specific aircraft you flew. It was about being the person who showed up when others needed help, whether that was a pregnant woman in labor at 30,000 feet or a grateful Air Force family who simply wanted to say thank you. The yellow teddy bear he'd brought to the hospital still sat proudly on baby Reed's shelf, a constant comforting reminder that sometimes the biggest, most impactful changes in life began with the smallest acts of kindness. And somewhere over the vast American Southwest, a pilot who had once broken protocol to save 2 lives now flew with something far greater than mere experience. He flew with profound purpose.